Welcome back. And here are my closing statements. What makes democracy work and what makes a democratic society? Now, the Democratic Index can help us as a guide to answer these questions. The Democratic Index is an index compiled by the Economist Intelligence Unit, the research division of the Economics Group, a UK-based private company which publishes the weekly newspaper, The Economist. The Democratic Index produces a weighted average on the answers to 60 questions grouped in the following categories. Number one, measuring electoral process and pluralism. Civil liberties. 3, the functioning of government. 4, political participations. And 5th, political culture in any society. The index categorizes all the about 167 countries into 4 broad categories, namely, number 1, full democracy. Number 2, flawed democracy. Number 3, hybrid regimes. And number 4, authoritarian governments. Now, the index also gives scores to each of these countries ranging from the lowest, which is 1, to the highest, 10. Now, let's dive straight into each of those categorizations of the countries to examine what makes a democratic society and why others aren't democratic. Number 1, using full democracy. These are nations where civil liberties and fundamental political reforms are not only respected, but also reinforced by a political culture that is conducive, to democratic ideals. These nations have a valid and evident system of governmental checks and balances, an independent judiciary whose decisions are enforced, the governments that function adequately, and a diverse and independent media that is free from any sort of repression and muscling. These nations also have only limited problems in democratic governance. The examples of these nations include Canada, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, the nations of the Scandinavian regions, and then, of course, surprisingly, you have Costa Rica in Latin America, you have Chile, you have South Korea, and you have Japan. Surprisingly, only about 8% of global population live in these countries. The second one we want to check is flawed democracy. These are nations where elections are free and fair, and basic civil liberties are honored, but these countries may have challenges in their democratic culture. I mean, maybe in the functioning of government or in certain areas where elections will not be fully participatory. Examples of some of these nations include, surprisingly, America. Also, Israel is categorized as a flawed democracy. For instance, the current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is trying to, amend the judicial laws because he was, prosecuted recently. Also, a flawed democracy includes South Africa. You have Brazil. Of course, if you remember what former President Jair Bolsonaro did after he lost and his people, moved to the streets and all of that. So you have South Africa, you have Cape Verde, you have Botswana, you have India, you have Morocco. These are flawed democratic societies. 37.3% of global population live in these countries. Then the third category are hybrid regimes. These are nations with regular electoral frauds, preventing it from being free and fair democracies. These nations commonly have governments that apply pressure on political oppositions. The judiciary is non-independent. There is widespread and pervasive corruption in the governance architecture, harassment and pressure placed on media, anemic rule of law, and much more. Now, examples of nations in this category: number 1, expectedly, Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Paraguay, Peru, Tunisia, Benin, Republic, Ivory Coast, and all of that. You have 17.9% of global population living in these countries. And then the last category are authoritarian regimes. This shouldn't be difficult. You have China, you have North Korea, you have Russia. These are nations where there are zero or no political participation. These are repressive, oppressive societies where there's no civil liberty, there are no guarantees of civil liberties. The rule of law is about the rule of one individual, like Russia, like China, like North Korea, and all of that. Sadly, about 38.9% of global population live in these nations. Now, globally, Nigeria is ranked 105 out of 167 countries in the overall ranking in 2022. Also, it should really not come as a surprise that in the entire African continent, only Mauritius is ranked as a full democracy. Most African nations are either hybrid or authoritarian regimes. The conversation towards the deepening of democratic culture in Nigeria is an ongoing conversation. Now, remember, change requires action, and positive change requires positive action. I believe in a new Nigeria, and it is possible. And those are my closing thoughts. Now, that's the program today. Remember to follow me on my different social media handles. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch this particular video and the others there at your convenience. Drop your comments also. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.